hello and welcome and good evening. It's Monday and This Is Going Well, I think, with David Cooper. I am, you guessed it, David Cooper. This is the show where no one's listening. No one cares. The show where every episode's the last episode. But thank you for listening and thank you for caring. And I'll also be here tomorrow. In about 10 minutes' time, we'll get a little serious. We'll talk to a journalist and trauma researcher on the side of crime reporting, true crime that you definitely will not see depicted in the media. You may be used to shocking stories, horrific photographs, chilling videos, but underneath it all, it's the victims of the crime, and it's the reporters who interface with them. And the fact is, the way most coverage goes is not good for either the victim or the reporter. And we will talk to Tamara Cherry, someone with expertise in this area, who's written a book about it. And after that, in about half an hour, some wild news that I read. In America, a shocking number of parents have taken on sizable debt for their Disney trips with their kids. A financial expert is going to take this apart with me, tell you how not to go into debt on family vacations, and if you're thinking about taking on that kind of debt, he'll tell you the best way to do it. That is but a small portion of the show. There are more great things, including an insect outbreak that happened to somebody who works on this show. Thank God it wasn't me. A great lineup, so stay with me as we navigate through it. But first, this. Here's a feel-good piece for you. A few nights ago, 3 Michigan men, probably drinking beer, they might have been discussing the finer points of flannel fashion or which brand of motor oil is best, when suddenly a raccoon strolled up upon them. Now, this wasn't your usual trash panda looking for a snack. This little guy, he was in trouble. Now, our 3 heroes, they noticed the raccoon, who we'll call Randy, was standing on his hind legs, as if to give them the international sign for, "Help, I'm choking." Now, one of the men, the bravest of heroes, decides to help little Randy out. So he goes over and he starts patting Randy on the back. Now, I don't know about you, but if some large beer-drinking Michigan man ran up behind me and started patting me on the back without any warning, I might develop some trust issues. But our little friend, in his recently eaten cheese-induced panic, well, he welcomed the help. One of the guys, clearly a back-patting expert, starts coaching the man on his technique. "Lower, Bill, lower," he shouts, as if they're in some sort of bizarre wildlife version of CPR class. But with a well-placed pat, Randy coughs up a piece of cheese. A raccoon choking on cheese. I gotta play the clip for you.
He is choking, though. A little bit lower, Bill. Upward motion. There you go. There it is. A little bit lower. Let's take it. Let's go. You're not going to die. Yes. You're not going to die. You saved the clip. I don't think you got that.
God.
That was terrifying.
No.
And you heard it, just like that. Randy, free to continue his nightly dumpster dives and whatnot. The whole heroic moment caught on video, and it's gone viral, obviously, proving once again the internet loves a good animal rescue story, especially when there's cheese involved. Now, these guys, they didn't name the raccoon Randy. They named him Rocket, after the raccoon from Guardians of the Galaxy. And they say they wouldn't mind if Rocket or any other raccoon with a flair for the dramatic came out and hung out with them again. They're a friend to the trash panda. So, next time you're out late, drinking beer, and a raccoon comes up to you looking all distressed like, remember, a good pat on the back can save a life. And if that's not a reason to perfect your Heimlich maneuver on your pets, I don't know what is. Actually, don't do the Heimlich on your pets. Please do not do the Heimlich on your pets. Unless they need it. I love you, Rocky. May you live long and prosper and eat many cubes of cheese to come. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever heard of Fat Beach Day? Yes, this is a real thing, and it's making quite a splash this weekend. Far Rockaway in Queens, New York City hosted one of these fantabulous events aiming to create a judgment-free zone for the plus-size community. The woman, the organizer, the mastermind behind all of it says it's a way for people to be truly themselves. Her journey into, quote, fat activism started young, after years of being bullied for her weight. She started a blog at age 12. A bit early to be an activist, but hey, some kids start with lemonade stands, and some kids are Malala. One store owner of a vintage shop in Brooklyn, quote, curated for curves, says she's thrilled about this whole thing. She says, I'm so self-conscious at the beach, and I'm never around people that look like me. And honestly, isn't that what we all need? A place where we don't have to feel like beach whales next to sexy dolphins. But today, where everyone's popping Ozempic like it's the new Tic Tac, I gotta say, events like Fat Beach Day are a refreshing splash of reality. And it's needed. Vogue Business reported that for the autumn-winter 2024 season, only 0.8% of all models were plus size. That's fewer plus-size models than straight people at a Cher concert. New York City's even gotten on board with this whole body positivity wave. Mayor Eric Adams signed a bill last year banning weight discrimination in hiring and housing. And it's a great move because honestly, New York, the only thing they should be judging people on is whether they eat Chicago deep dish pizza because that stuff is fucking disgusting. But let's be real. The internet, a cesspool of hate. One person who attended said, I never realized how many people hate fat people until I got to TikTok. Yes, TikTok, where teenagers dance, middle-aged men pretend they're still teenagers, and people are jerks. So here's my take. We should all embrace body acceptance. Everyone deserves to feel confident and happy in their own skin because, well, why not? Fat Beach Day is a step in the right direction. Because if we were all meant to look the same, we'd be clones. And I saw the documentary Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and it doesn't end well. Jar Jar Binks has a punchable face. In monkey news, we go to a bunch of macaque monkeys on a sunny island off of Puerto Rico where temperatures hit around 40 degrees Celsius or 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, I'm bilingual. Now, these macaques are not exactly the sharing type. They're like that one friend who hogs the fan during a scorching summer barbecue. But hold on to your bananas, because things took a turn with these monkeys after Hurricane Maria in 2017. The hurricane itself was a real party crasher, wiping out a staggering 63% of the island's vegetation. Suddenly, shade became a precious commodity. And guess what? Those feisty macaques decided it was time to turn over a new leaf. Researchers from Harvard found that these monkeys started playing nice with each other after the disaster. They went from being complete jerks to shade-sharing buddies. It's like they went to an island-wide therapy session. A doctor from Harvard even mentioned that the extreme heat made it dangerous not to cool down. So, while you're thinking these monkeys might be good people, they were kind of forced to get along to survive. But if monkeys can start playing nice after a disaster, maybe there's hope for us humans too, right? But here's where things get a little more wild. These monkeys didn't just share shade, they started hanging out more. I'm picturing them sipping their morning coconut lattes together before the heat forced them to seek shelter. Another researcher said the hurricane changed their entire social game. But let's get real. If a hurricane can make monkeys get along better, maybe we need a metaphorical hurricane to hit our political landscape. Just saying. And while I'm not convinced of this, maybe, just maybe, the threat of climate change will do the trick. With global warming, maybe we'll all just need a little more shade and we can band together hiding from the sun. At least maybe we can do that while we wait for entire environmental collapse to kill us all. So here's where we land. We've got monkeys turning into social butterflies thanks to a hurricane. It's a heartwarming tale of survival, cooperation, and the power of a good shady spot. So if they can do it, what's stopping us? In just a few minutes' time, when you hear crime reporting, true crime stories, you might think the sensational headlines, the chilling imagery, the shocking videos. You might think of an interview with the victims that are tear-filled. But what people don't talk about is the impact on the victims and of the journalists that covering trauma has. So we'll talk to reporter Tamara Cherry about her book, The Trauma Beat, that covers crime journalism from that angle. We are here to talk the side of crime reporting you probably won't see depicted in the media. I am here with someone from Saskatchewan. She's a journalist, a trauma researcher, a communications consultant, and an author. Check out her book, The Trauma Beat, A Case for Rethinking the Business of Bad News. There's also a podcast of the same name. That book, though, available wherever books are sold, I think. Is it available wherever books are sold? Hello, Tamara Cherry.
It should be. And if it's not, you ask your bookstore person to order it in, because it should be available everywhere.
I saw it on Amazon, but I feel like that's the worst place to buy a book. I feel like the author gets the least amount of money if you buy it from Amazon.
I actually have no idea. I have no idea. People have asked me that. Where should I buy the book from that I'm supporting you the most? And I have no idea. I don't know how any of that stuff works. Yeah. So I appreciate anybody buying it from any place at all. But yeah, if you buy from Amazon, you're probably giving some money to the overlords.
Oh, Mr. Bezos. Yeah, know him well.
Yes.
I don't want to talk about a cheesy TV show, but I just finished watching Tokyo Vice. When I think crime reporting, when I think true crime stories, I do not look at it from the side of the reporter. That show depicts that side. It's a fictionalized thing. It's also the Yakuza. Like, it has nothing to do with what you do necessarily, but it was kind of an interesting depiction of it.
That's it. I didn't know that was a show. I read the book Tokyo Vice. That was a book first, right?
Absolutely, it was.
Yeah, written by a journalist in Japan.
Yes.
An American journalist who was in Japan. Gosh, I read that book years ago. I didn't know that it had been turned into a show. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Okay, we're learning something new. Let's talk you, though. What draws you to crime reporting when you first start getting, when you first start out in journalism?
Well, so when I went into journalism school, I thought that I was going to write for a snowboarding magazine, which turned out to be like, no, not happening at all, because I did my first internship at the Regina Leader Post where I was going to school. And I think it was like the second or third day on the job, I was dispatched out to interview a New York journalist and author who was in town talking about her book about her father who had died from Alzheimer's disease. And I sat with her for like 45 minutes. And by the end of the interview, she was crying, I was crying. And that was really the story that made me fall in love with telling stories about, things that can make people feel something or make people care. So fast forward, I went to do an internship at the Calgary Herald, dabbled a little bit in crime reporting. But it was really not until I got to the Toronto Star, where I was working in what is referred to as the radio room or the box, where you do all of your reporting from inside this windowless room. I understand they might have windows now, but they didn't when I was back there. And you're just listening to police, fire, and ambulance scanners. You're monitoring the other news outlets, and you're writing for the paper, for the web. And a lot of what you end up doing is crime reporting. And it turned out that I had a knack for it. And I honestly, I think it just came down to trying to telling stories that I felt were actually really meaningful. And I wanted to, scream from the rooftops about some of the stuff that was happening, so I could make the people in Rosedale, an affluent Toronto neighborhood, care about the people in Rexdale, an impoverished Toronto neighborhood where a lot of gun violence was happening. And yeah, I mean, that was really the driving force. And I did it for almost 15 years.
So what do you begin to notice as you tell these stories about the people you're speaking to, about the things that get left out of the story, about the impact that it's having on them? What do you begin to notice as you start doing this?
Well, I don't notice anything while I'm in it. While I'm in it, I am telling myself that the work I'm doing is important, that these people deserve to have their voices amplified, like the grieving mother. If I can just have her on the news, then maybe somebody who knows something will be compelled to call in an anonymous tip to Crime Stoppers. It wasn't actually until I left my job in journalism and I launched my company, Pickup Communications, which is a PR firm that supports trauma survivors and relevant stakeholders, that I really began to understand the impact. And I'll just go back a second. So I launched that company because I saw a huge gap in services, whereas I was going and knocking on the door of, the case that comes to mind all the time for me is this traffic fatality in the GTA, in the Greater Toronto Area, where some of the dead were, among the dead were these two siblings, and they were their parents' only children. And a reporter from a newspaper, at this point I was working in television, who was a buddy of mine, said, "Hey, do you have the address for the parents?" And I'm like, "What parents? Like my story's in the bag. I don't need to go knocking on any doors." But he said, like, "I'm going over there now. Here's where they live if you want to go." So I'm like, well, now I have to go knock on this door because otherwise my bosses are going to be wondering, why did he get the pickup, which is where my company name comes from. Whereas that's what we call, getting a picture of the deceased and hopefully an interview with their loved ones. If he gets pickup and I don't, then I'm going to have to go knock on this door tomorrow anyway. So I showed up and he was interviewing this parent who was standing out on the porch, like holding a picture of his 2 kids who are now dead. And he finished with him. I went, talked to this parent. I finished with them. Another reporter showed up, and then on and on and on. And I was like, what the hell? Like this, there's got to be a better way of doing this, right? So after I launched my company, the pandemic hit like 2 months later. And so I had to hit reset on a bunch of things. So I decided to check off this thing that I had on my very long list of things to do, which is a research project examining the impact of the media on trauma survivors. And it later expanded to include the impact of trauma on members of the media. And that is really where my eyes were open to all the crap that we hurl upon these poor trauma survivors in their most vulnerable moments. I didn't realize that, for example, and it actually sounds crazy when I say it now, but I didn't realize how awful it was for a homicide survivor to see an image of their loved one in a body bag. Like as a television reporter, I'm like, how do I illustrate that somebody's died? Show the body bag, show the body removal shot. And I did it over and over and over again. And over again, I was hearing from these homicide and traffic fatality survivors, why are you showing these body bags? We don't want to see this. I was hearing from traffic fatality survivors, why are you showing the wreckage? I know, like, all I can see is my child dead in that car, even though we couldn't see it. So I didn't realize what sorts of things were activating the trauma survivors or the trauma responses of so many survivors. Mass violence, like I was hearing things like, the repeated footage showing, like there was a survivor of the Pulse nightclub shooting that told me that, her trauma responses are activated anytime she hears a siren, because the news media kept showing these images of the ambulances one after another showing up the hospital, carrying all these victims. So now she hears that and her heart rate goes up. She becomes anxious, all of these things. There are so many things that I realized were, just a part of the regular, facts gathering and storytelling process that were actually very harmful for these survivors. And then I started realizing as I was surveying and interviewing journalists that a lot of what we were doing was harmful to us as well, including myself.
So this sort of new frame that you're looking at things with, this new lens you're looking at it, it's sort of a eureka moment, but the way you describe it to me, it seems so obvious to you now. Why do you think reporters aren't cognizant of that frame? Like you said, when you were first starting to report, it didn't even occur to you. You just wanted to get that impactful story out, show that impactful image to the audience. Why aren't the victims or the people that might be traumatized by what you're doing, why isn't that being considered by your peers?
Plain and simple, number one, we're never taught about trauma. There was no class I took in journalism school that would have even mentioned the word trauma. If you would have asked me 5.5 years ago when I was still in journalism, or 6 years ago, if I practiced trauma-informed journalism, and I actually remember somebody asking me this while I was shopping around my idea for my PR firm. And she said, like, are you trauma-informed? And I'm like, well, I speak with trauma victims. I didn't refer to them as survivors back then, but trauma victims like every day, like on a near daily basis, if not more, for the last like 15 years. How much more trauma informed could I be? She's like, no. You got to go out and learn about trauma. And I was defensive at the time because I'm like, I had literally created a course called Victims and the Impact of the Media for a Toronto area college for their victimology program. I'd literally been asked to create this course and teach it over the span of, I think on and off, I taught it for like 8 years. And here was this woman telling me I was not trauma informed. And she was totally right. We just don't learn about trauma. Not only that, but our industry is very defensive and wants to, create the rules on our own, which is not always a bad thing. In fact, it's a good thing when it comes to holding things like politicians to account. But we need to recognize that when it comes to trauma, it's different.
I'm here with Tamara Cherry. We are discussing really fascinating stuff. We're at that moment where trauma-informed journalism kind of occurs to you, despite your lengthy career and all this stuff. When we come back, I do want to talk about some of the ways in which we can educate journalists or change reporting to have less of an impact on survivors. And we are back with Tamara Cherry, a journalist, a trauma researcher, a communications consultant, also the author of The Trauma Beat, a case for rethinking the business of bad news. There's also a podcast of the same name. Tamara, thank you for talking to me about crime reporting. This is interesting.
Thanks for having me.
This is interesting stuff. Let's jump right back into the conversation. Trauma-informed journalism. What would you like to have known when you just started doing crime reporting? What do you know now that then, if you could just make that one change or have that one piece of information, what would you do differently?
I would have loved to have known about the impact that trauma has on the brain and on the body, the physiological impact, the psychological impact, because that would inform so much of the images that I used in my stories, the words that I use. It would have informed when I was reaching out to survivors. And it would have informed, fundamentally, the way that I tell these stories, because something I didn't realize until I did my research and I started digging into the impact of trauma on the brain is the way that trauma impacts somebody's brain is when your trauma responses are firing. So especially like in the immediate aftermath of a traumatic event, when survivors are most likely to be contacted by members of the media, your brain quite often cannot actually even construct a cohesive, accurate narrative of what happened. So if my job as a journalist is to go out and talk to people and then use their information to tell the public what happened, there's actually a really good chance that the information I'm getting from those sources of mine, the trauma victims and survivors, is not even entirely accurate. So classic example, there's a woman I interviewed for my book and later for my podcast who her name is Heather Martin. She's a survivor of the Columbine High School shooting. And she told me that like in the first couple days after the shooting, she told a journalist that when she was coming out of her school, like with her hands above her head, that she saw a military tank outside her school. There was no military tank. And this has become sort of like a running joke among Heather and her friends within the mass violence survivor community. But it really speaks to the fact that, her brain was telling her, our school's under siege. Of course, the military is responding. And she went out there and her brain tricked her into thinking this. And then she went and told it to a journalist. I could not find through my research whether that was ever printed or anything. It probably wasn't, because the journalist would have known from their own images that there wasn't a military tank there. But it is a classic example. Another example, a woman who filled out one of my surveys had told me in the survey that her son had been stabbed in the chest, when in fact her son had been stabbed in the back. And she only realized this discrepancy when I had sent her, an excerpt from my book for her to review. And she was horrified that she had gotten it wrong. And I was horrified because I thought, well, there's no way she got it wrong. This is a woman that had sat through every day in court. She knew that evidence like the back of her hand. She knew right down to the description of what the knife looked like after it was removed from her son's body. And clearly, because I wasn't trauma informed when I started my research project, the way that I had constructed my survey, her trauma responses were obviously firing when she was filling it out. And she gave me something that was just blatantly, factually incorrect. And so there's multiple ways that this would have impacted the reporting that I did. But at the very essence, I wish that I had had a course in journalism school, or at the very least, ongoing training throughout my journalism career about trauma and about how our reporting can impact survivors negatively and how it can, on the positive side, actually be used to support survivors in their healing journey if we do it right.
Well, what can that look like?
Collaboration. Historically, the way that these stories are told, and I'm talking about daily news journalism for the most part, but this applies to right across the true crime genre. If you think about the Netflix docs and podcasts and everything like that, historically, there's been a huge power imbalance, whereas the journalist has all the power and the survivor has none. And the journalist gets to pick what questions are going to be asked, in what order, what clips will be used, what images will be used, all that stuff. So what I advocate for now, and indeed what I do when in the storytelling that I do now, in my capacity as a communications consultant, is it's a really collaborative process. These are the questions I'm thinking of asking you. Are you okay with this? Like, what are the safe zones? What are the unsafe zones? What sort of stuff do you not want to talk about? What sort of stuff do you want to talk about? And I stick to it. And then it's a collaborative process, like throughout, where I'm telling them what they can expect from the beginning to end. How do you feel about me writing it this way? And just giving that power back, it makes such a difference. And I can tell you, like, not only does it get better stories and more accurate accounts, more thoughtful accounts, but it is a much more positive experience. So you spoke, I think you said before the break, David, how can we minimize the impact on these survivors? We can actually, not only mitigate the negative impact, but we can actually create a positive impact if we tell these stories in a trauma-informed way.
What about imagery for TV interviews and for documentaries? How would you go about that in a collaborative way? Do you just say, I'm thinking of running this imagery? Are you okay with it?
Yes. So number one, before I even get to production or anything, I'm saying, are there any images that have been out there that you have a problem with? And 9 times out of 10, they say there was an image of my son in the body bag in the immediate aftermath. Don't show that. Or there was a woman I was working with whose firefighter husband was killed in a wildfire. And I was supporting her in this media campaign. And she said the media at the time kept running the image of his burnt out truck. I don't want to see that. So then I knew going into when I was setting up interviews in that case, telling the journalist, she's willing to talk to you, but you can't use this image. They said, okay. Are you okay with images being used from social media? Are there any images that you want to make sure that we use? And then if there are images that are coming up that could be potentially harmful, I let them know that first, because they may say, if you're going to play that cell phone video that shows the actual shooting or where I can hear the sound of gunshots, I'm not participating in this. I'm just not. And so that's all about, getting that ongoing informed consent. So they know what they're signing up for and what they're consenting to. But then also it gives them a chance to, they might say, okay, you're using that, but I'm just not going to watch it because that's harmful for me. Or instead of using that, could you use this? And we have a conversation about it. So it's really about that ongoing informed consent and really giving that survivor agency in the way their stories are collected and shared.
There's something else I want to talk about. We just have a couple minutes. I hope that's enough time. The other side of it, the impact that all this might have on you, the impact that all this might have on the crime reporter. A very small question I'm sure we can answer in just a minute or
yeah,
two.
right.
But do you want to give me the high-level overview of,
Sure.
of how you've researched into this and what experience you've had with this side of it?
Yeah. So when I set out to write my book, I did not plan on it being about myself. A big chunk of it ended up being about myself because I realized how deeply effed up I had become from my job. And so if you want to get if you want to really get into the nitty gritty of how my job effed me up, go and read the book. What I will say though, vicarious trauma, journalists that are very high risk of developing vicarious trauma, PTSD, from absorbing the traumatic stories of others. But I've spent even more money on therapy dealing with something called moral injury, which is the moral injury I suffered from going and knocking on a door when my gut told me I shouldn't be here, or knocking on it again when they've already said no and my bosses are sending me back, or just holding my breath and hoping that I get the story right and then getting a call from a survivor after saying, how could you do this? My number one message to journalists is you cannot adequately take care of yourself unless you're taking care of the people you're reporting on. #moral injury. Read the book for more.
Yeah, there's that death by 1,000 cuts when you work for a media company that is expecting you to do something and maybe it's not right or maybe it's sort of half right. Like the story, the story should be told, but maybe not this way, or I'm omitting something, or I'm not getting the headline if I dig into this sort of side, or I don't knock on the door. I don't want to. Yeah, that can happen when you work for a big media company.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying change needs to come. Change is happening, I would say, from the bottom up, but it needs to come from the top down. Whereas every newsroom should have a policy on trauma-informed storytelling, on reporting on traumatic stories, and the public. So here's a message for your listeners, anybody that consumes true crime or crime news in general. question whether the journalism you are reading, listening to, or watching has been ethically sourced. We demand that our coffee beans are ethically sourced, that our clothing is not stitched by a 5-year-old in Bangladesh. We should likewise be demanding that our news is ethically sourced.
I couldn't agree more. I'd like to see change here. I'm glad you're speaking out, and it was really nice to meet you today, Tamara.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me, David.
Tamara Cherry is a journalist, a trauma researcher, a communications consultant. Check out her book, The Trauma Beat, A Case for Rethinking the Business of Bad News. Check out the podcast of the same name. Tamara, thank you again.
Thank you.
According to a recent survey, a shocking number of parents have taken on a huge amount of debt to take their kids to Disneyland. We'll break that down with a finance expert and ask the question, is this really such a big deal? And what might be a better way to spend your money? And if you're going to take on debt to go to Disney or whatever your family vacation is, what's the best way to do it? There are parents out there who have been taking on large debt to take their kids to Disney trips. That is at least according to a new survey. I'm here to chat about that with personal finance expert, chief credit analyst at LendingTree, and author of Ask Questions, Save Money, Make More. That's available wherever books are sold. His name is Matt Schulz. Matt, thanks for talking to me today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
How was the intro? Did I get it all right? I'm always worried. I say something wrong and then I got to get corrected. It's a whole thing. But that's who you are, right?
It's a mouthful, yeah, but it's all good.
Were you shocked to hear that parents were taking on this kind of debt to just provide a nice trip to America's Fantasyland, Disneyland?
Honestly, no. Disney trips are such a rite of passage and such a thing that so many parents want to take their kids on that they're willing to take on a little bit of debt. And especially over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen such a shift from people pursuing things to people pursuing experiences that we've seen such a shift in people's preferences for experiences over things that this really stands to reason that this would be one of those things that people would be able to be willing to take on a little bit of debt for.
It's funny you mention, I have a science communicator on the show every week, Dan Riskin, and a few weeks ago he came to me with a story that they did a study, in some journal, where people long-term are more happy with experiences versus stuff with the way they spend their money. But, there's a but here. The survey we're talking about said 41% of these parents regret the impact of this financial burden that going on a Disney trip has. So we got to balance those two out. And I guess the question is Disney really the right experience to take on debt over?
Well, it really depends. And I'm somebody who believes that there is such a thing as good debt done in moderation. And we talk about good debt, at least before student loan debt went bananas where it is now. We used to talk about student loan debt as good debt because it had a long-term return on investment, and then other things like debt for going into a business and that sort of thing. But from my point of view, things like a trip to Disney or like a dream trip to Paris or even like splurging on Taylor Swift and Beyonce tickets.
Or Paris Disney. You can combine two of those.
There you go. And then throw in a Taylor Swift show afterwards. And I think that sort of thing can be good debt as well, done in moderation, because those sorts of memories and those sorts of experiences are things that you're going to remember fondly for the rest of your life. So that I see that as a positive return on investment. Again, obviously it has to be done in moderation. You can't go too crazy with it too often, but in the right circumstances, I'm okay with it.
Well, let's talk moderation, because I was reading an article where you were quoted as saying there are cheaper ways to do this. There are sort of gotcha costs. One that comes to mind is like food, beverages, all those kinds of things. Like you go to a movie theater, you buy a soda, it's $5,000. Is there a way to experience Disney where you get the family memories, but they don't get you on all those kind of like, I don't know what the word is for it. When they lock you in, like when you're in a stadium and you get overcharged for something. There's a name for that practice. I just forget what it is.
Yeah, I mean you're a bit of a captive audience there, right? In a lot of places, but at Disney in particular, you can bring in snacks and drinks and that sort of thing. And when you're there in the middle of the summer, Orlando, Florida, or even LA is not exactly a chilly place to go in the summertime, and those drinks can really end up costing a lot, and then you end up buying food and all that kind of thing. It can really run up the price. And if you think ahead and you bring a cooler and some bottles of water and that sort of stuff, it may not equal the cost of, like a night at a hotel or whatever, but you're talking about anything that you can do to reduce these costs to maybe limit the amount of debt you take on. It's worth the effort.
What are we talking? Like, I have no concept. I don't have a family. I've never taken on debt to go to Disneyland. The only time I've been is to the one, I don't know if it's Disney World, the one in Tampa Bay or Orlando, rather, as a kid.
Yeah, Disney World is the one in Orlando. Disneyland is in Anaheim.
I don't know if my parents took on debt to take us there. I guess I could ask them. How much are we talking? Like, how much is a regular, let's say, family of four going to Disneyland going to cost? And they do everything sort of mid-range in terms of accommodation and extras.
Yeah, what our survey found is that for the average folks that have taken on some sort of debt from Disney, the number is about $1,700. But when you're talking about parents of young kids, who obviously that's the prime demo for this, right? We're talking about a little less than $2,000 in debt. And I mean, that's significant. I mean, it's a lot of money. But it depends on obviously where you stand, right? I mean, for some people, $2,000 isn't that big a deal. For some people, $2,000 is several months of debt payoffs. So again, like anything, it's about knowing what you can afford. And if you can be planful, if you can put stuff in your budget, if you can save some money away in a high yield savings account, if you can do things that can get you a reduced airfare, a reduced night at a hotel, stuff like that, these things can help bring down your debt. So there are things that you can do. But again, like anything, it's about kind of being planful, being thoughtful going in.
Let's talk being thoughtful, because I think there's a smart and maybe less smart way of doing some of these things. Like, for example, right now, with interest rates so high, traditionally leaving money as a pile of cash is not a great decision. It's just losing its value. It's competing against inflation. But with interest rates so high right now, the smart way to do it is have a high yield savings account. Then your money's making 5%, 5.5%. It's pretty high right now. I know you work at Lending Tree, so maybe there's some bias here. Maybe this is a loaded question. Is there a smart way to take on debt? Are there certain ways to take on debt that maybe have higher percentages, higher paybacks? You're going to be stuck with it longer versus better ways to do it?
Well, the best way that you can do it is as low interest as possible. And again, like you said, the high yield savings account, if you can pay for everything in cash, which is, I guess rewards notwithstanding, if you're just trying to avoid debt, paying in cash is the way to go. And if you can save for a year or even 6 months ahead to help you in a high yield savings account where you're getting 4 or 5% back, that can really help you avoid some of that debt. But one of the things that you can do to kind of knock down your debt is to potentially sign up for a new credit card, because we talk a lot about 0% offers in credit cards when it comes to balance transfers, but there are also cards that come with 0% offers for purchases for 12 months, 15 months, whatever. And you need decent credit to get one of those cards, but that can be a way to help you, even though it may seem counterintuitive to get a new credit card to save money, it really can work. And the other thing that I talk about in my book is the fact that you can often call your credit card issuer and ask them to lower your interest rate. About 3 out of every 4 people who do that get their way, and it's average about 6 percentage points.
Wow.
So it'd be like going from 25% on a card to 19. And if you are carrying some debt or you anticipate carrying some debt, that 6 percentage point reduction can save you real money over the course of time. So there are things you can do.
You mentioned the 0% APR credit card. About 5 or 10 years ago, I had a decent credit score, maybe high 700s or something. And I thought, okay, I'll buy my motorbike on this new credit card I got with, I think it was 24 months, 0% APR. I'm like, I won't have to pay any interest. I'll pay off the bike in 24 months. All great, all worked. But I didn't realize how hard that would hit my credit score. I think I dropped to like a 730, 720 immediately. So there's gotchas there with the 0% APR credit card thing for sure. But it is a good way to do it.
Yeah, and there's also the idea that, and I talk about this a lot around holiday shopping, but you could do it for travel as well. The idea of if you have money saved and you're planning and you can use cash to do one of these trips, what you can do instead is get yourself a new credit card, pay for the trip with that credit card, and earn enough, spend enough to get that sign-up bonus of a free night or a couple $100 or whatever the case might be, and then use that cash in savings to pay off that credit card with no interest. So that way you're not paying any interest. You're accomplishing the same thing that you would have just by paying cash. But because you use that new credit card, got that sign-up bonus, maybe they threw a couple of $100 your way, or 50,000 air miles, or a free night of a hotel. So there are plenty of things that you can do with a little bit of advanced planning.
Matt, thanks for chatting with me about this.
Thank you.
Matt Schulz, he's a personal finance expert, a chief credit analyst at LendingTree, and the author of Ask Questions, Save Money, Make More. That's available wherever books are sold. You know him. You know him. In a moment's time, we'll talk to foreign correspondent Tony Five about a vulgar viral video that's been making its round on the old internets, where some southern girl proclaims "Huck Tuah" is the move of the moment. And of course, he wouldn't be our foreign correspondent if we didn't do foreign reporting about the royals in London, England. So you got that to look forward to. We are here with Tony Five. It is the Monday Roundup, checking in on how the weekend went over in France is where you were. You were like in Marseille or Pompeii or something that ends with an A.
Yep. Good afternoon, David. It is me, Tony Five, live, coming back from Calais. And as I like to say, so you know me, David, and my own memes. Spit on that thing, David.
Yeah, I feel like I gotta play a clip for what that is. I think it's something that went viral over the weekend. The internet's become obsessed with this woman who just made a vulgar spitting sexual reference during an interview. I'm gonna play the clip now.
What's one move in bed that makes a man go crazy every time?
Oh, you gotta give him that huck to and spit on that thing. You get me?
I don't get you. I think you gotta demonstrate.
Huck to and spit on it. Spit on it.
Tony, I don't understand what the hell she means with the Tuah. What does this mean? Spitting on the genitals? I don't understand.
David, this is a good Christian girl. Believe this was videoed at a nunnery.
Yes.
No idea why it's gone viral. I think a guy maybe asked her, what's the best sound a man can hear? Or something along those lines. She, with her female friend, said, you got to hook to, basically throwing a loogie at said genitalia, spit on that fang being the penile component of the sexual intercourse. and she has become viral. There have been remixes, there have been house versions, horror versions, there have been versions with all manner of people. There's one with Obama, there's one in the English football team, there's one at the Oscars. I don't know who has the time to make these memes. I genuinely think how it can have gone from this meme is spread around, I get that. But it's gone so, it's like an Uber meme. Like it's gone so big that there are like they do these first two notes and it turns into some classical music song. It's incredible.
Yeah, it reminds me of the bed intruder. Remember that guy when he's like, hide your wife, hide your kids, and everyone did the remix?
Yeah.
Why do you think the internet's so obsessed with this girl? She's young, she's moderately attractive, she's vulgar, she's confident, she's got that southern accent, like I think she's from Tennessee. I think you just mix all of these components and you just get a very special moment captured on video that the internet loves. I just worry about her. Like, she seems like she likes the drank, as she probably says, and I worry that this media attention might get her up in a whirlwind of pain, you know?
Well, it's going to ruin her. I mean, can you imagine the long conversation that she's going to have with her dad? Or for example, it came out on a Friday or a Saturday. Poor guy goes to work on a Monday morning and he goes, hey, guy, I saw your daughter on the internet. You're like, oh, man, really? And this is going to live forever. I think people don't realize that this stuff stays forever. You know, it's just, she's going to be that hooked her girl forever.
Yeah.
And her mate's going to be the mate of the hooked her girl forever. I mean, I can't really remember her mate, but it's just, I feel sorry for her. I genuinely think she'll regret. Is she making money out of it? Can she copyright her image? I don't know. I don't know about all these sort of things.
I feel like we've talked about copywriting of the likeness, but is she savvy enough to defend her copyright? Like, if the internet if a million people make t-shirts with her face on it, how's she going to play whack-a-mole and take them all down? I don't know if she's going to make any money off this.
Apparently, it was in the PGA Tour golf. Somebody hit a ball from teed off, and then somebody goes, "Hawk, just spit on that thing," and like people just like unbelievable. It's a hockey match. It's just unbelievable. The internet. It's like we've got nothing better to do with. It's not like there's like wars going on in the world. People are dying. It's just all about this American girl.
Do you remember that day on the internet, Tony, where there was the llamas and there was the dress that was either gold and black and blue and red and purple? And it was, these llamas were escaped and these like sheriffs in some American town were chasing the llamas around town. The internet loved that. And then the same day, there was these two dresses that everyone said were, I don't know, one color, another color.
Blue or silver. And it wasn't. It was just blue.
I mean, to me, it was blue as well. But to other people, it was gold or whatever. That was a great internet day. Is Tuah a great internet day like that? Or do you need two internet items to come out on one day to make it a great day?
Like most things in life, there two parties have to be involved. Two comets hitting each other, sexual intercourse, when you play bowling. So I think you have to have another thing coming in to marry it. As you know, Newton's law is equal and opposite attractions, detractions, and substantials. So it's just like that, David. Go.
Tony, that makes perfect sense. You should be an astronomer, a paleontologist, and a gynecologist, because really, that makes tons of sense.
I'm actually checking my inbox now to see if that latest Groupon has come in, David. As you know, I do graduate from the Groupon University of the United States, and my expertise knows no bounds or limitations, or has limitations that without any bounds.
Okay, Tony, what I wanted to do with you today is a little provincial news, but this time from all of England, which is the most provincial of the provinces, I think. David, will it be about our Royal Highnesses, the royal family? It will be. We've got some stories from the royals. I think they're all tabloid level. Are any of them true? That I don't know. This first one maybe is true, though, because it's run by the BBC. What do British people think of the BBC, by the way? Because I'm from Canada. I know what Canadians think of the CBC. I know what Americans think of all their various news outlets. I know what we think of the BBC, but I don't know what you think of the BBC. It's weird because the BBC is funded by us, the taxpayers. So we have to pay a TV license to have the BBC. So technically the BBC is meant to be seen as completely impartial, which is very difficult to be. So for example, they can't side with any particular government body. They can't side on the side of
for example, the royal family or anti-royalists, for example. So it's quite fascinating. Most people think it's a rip-off because you've got such competition from people like Netflix and Amazon and all the other commercial stations. So the BBC doesn't advertise as such. So you won't see any commercials on the BBC. It's just straight programming.
But is it considered to be leftist, rightist? Like, is it?
It used to be considered to be rightist, very staunch conservative. Now it's kind of more of a centre ground because very many liberals have sort of taken over and are kind of within it now, and very sort of PC, which it never used to be. But it was generally the very straight-laced conservative channel, whereas you'd get one of the commercial channels like Channel 4, which showed like the first lesbian kiss and somebody doing drugs and things like that, and nudity and things like that. That was on another channel called Channel 4.
And that weird late night overnight show called Naked Attraction, that's Channel 4, isn't
Correct.
it? Yeah.
Channel 4. Correct, yeah. You would never get that on the BBC.
That show's so amazing. All right, this story, I don't know if you could get any more British than this headline. Prince Anne in hospital after suspected injury from horse.
Nice. Princess Anne, by the way, not Prince. She ain't got a wiener, but she actually, her and her daughter are quite famous horse riders. They compete in dressage, and I think her daughter, if I'm not mistaken, her daughter's like an Olympian, has won an Olympic medal in it, and she's like famous for riding horses and so on. And I think a horse just kicked her. And sort of she hit her head and she got admitted to hospital. It was sort of a breaking news story earlier on today. But I think she's okay. And I think if you're around horses at some stage, you'll probably get kicked by them. So not a big story unless you got like kicked in the head properly. But yeah.
But I feel like they're just left to do nothing, just enjoy their money, enjoy their wealth, enjoy their estates. And so what do? They hunt and they ride horses. And I don't know, they play with corgis. Like, what do the royals do if not ride horses? And to me, that's why it's a stereotypical story for Prince Anne.
Well, yeah, apart from that, they sex traffic underage women. But, I mean, there's not a lot else they do.
Look, I'm not the defender of Randy Andy, but that's seemingly only one member of the royal family that we know of yet.
That's true. I mean, yeah, apart from that, I don't know, what would you do? What would you do if all of a sudden you became landed gentry, David? You were given a horse, a title, King David of Cooper. What would you do?
I don't know. I think I'd do something along the lines of what Prince Harry did. Sorry, Princess Harry. If
would you be benevolent? Would you reach out to your subjects and speak to them and help them?
I would just right off. I wouldn't want to have anything to do with that family if I were a member of it. I would enjoy the perks and be a spoiled brat, enjoy the money,
right.
Enjoy it all. I can do what I want, whatever I want, nice house, private yacht, whatever, but I would right off. I would have nothing to do with them because the institution itself would be so gross to me, but not so gross that I couldn't extract the wealth and enjoy my life. So I would probably move to the United States. I'd move somewhere where they care a lot less than live anywhere near the UK.
Really? See, I get a feeling you'd get very bored of it. I can't imagine you would want to be... You're not a conformist at all, so I can imagine you would be like that. Whereas I'd be the opposite. I would love to be regal and, cut somebody's head off or, enable prima nocta, which apparently is I take the virginity of on the first night of every wedding in the country. Have you ever heard of that?
Is that a real thing? That was a real right of the king?
Yeah, it was called prima nocta.
Wow.
Yeah, in historical terms, and I'm saying historical terms, Braveheart with Mel Gibson, where the king would oversee a wedding, on the wedding night, the king would have to take a virginity of the bride.
Wow, that you're not lying. The droit de seigneur or jus prima nocta.
Prima nocta.
The right of the first night or the right of the lord. It's the legal right in medieval Europe allowing feudal lords, kings, to have sexual relations with any female subject, particularly on her wedding night. Wow, what a world. What a great country you come from, Tony.
I'm telling you, if they could vote that back in, that would get my vote. That would get my tick on the ballot paper, David. Prima nocta.
I think the last known instance of it in England was in 1679, so it's at least been 15, 20 years since they've done it.
I mean, if you sit there with a calculator, you'd find it's actually 23 years ago. And yeah, it could come back, David. I'm just waiting. Like Flares, like 8-Track Records, like Michael Jackson, they're all coming back.
All right, we're here with Tony 5 going over the news of the day as it comes to the royals in England. We are back with foreign correspondent Tony Five, doing as much foreign corresponding as he can possibly bear. Tony, welcome back.
David, I'm foreign. I'm a correspondent. Let's go.
Prince William, or as we say, Princess William, has been caught dancing to Taylor Swift's Shake It Off at a concert with kids. Can you imagine the scandal, the controversy, the outrage? How could he do this to the United Kingdom?
David, he was there in the Royal Box with his children doing what only could be described as typical dad dancing. The type of dancing you know when you know you're never going to have sex with anybody else ever again.
Yep. And Taylor Swift actually did a selfie with the king or the future king or queen or whatever and the kids.
Well, he did it with the future king and the future king.
Man, they have some British teeth, those people. They're just honkers sticking out there.
It's very much like an Austin Powers parody when you see the teeth, don't you?
You have decent teeth. Did your parents get braces or you were just blessed?
I'm just blessed with very nice teeth. They're very white, very crisp, very clean.
Yeah, they're not stereotypically British, those teeth.
No. These are black teeth, David.
Okay. Is that a thing? Do black folks have straighter teeth? I've never heard that.
Honestly, all the watermelon, all the chicken, unbelievable for you.
You had to do that, didn't you? All right, we go to Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Canterbury or whatever. Canterbury. Yeah. What's her duchessness of?
She's the Duchess of Cambridge.
And the opposite of a duchess is a Dutch?
Duchy, I think.
Okay, so...
And you pass it.
Yeah. So Harry the Duchy on the left-hand side.
Correct.
So we go to the Duchess's new product line, which is not a jam or dog biscuits.
What is it?
I don't know.
Is it goop?
I don't know.
Is it vaginal lube?
I've got to go deep into this article. Pink
lube
wine.
Like a duchess.
Pink wine.
God.
Delicious.
Isn't it embarrassing that they're sort of peddling? I don't know. There's a lot of things about Meghan only marrying into it because she wanted to be a princess, and the fact that she's kind of thrown her toys out of the pram because she isn't a princess, and her kids have been denied the use of being princes and princesses. You know, they're duchess as well. So sometimes I see stuff like that and I think maybe it's true. Maybe she did just want to be a princess and she's really upset that she didn't read the small print.
Here's something. Everyone in the UK who's on, I don't know, a right wing, hating them, hating Harry and Meghan, they're mad at Meghan for wanting to be a princess and marrying in. But they're not mad at the royals who just get born into it. They don't even have to want it. They just get it. To me, she's less bad. Even if she's laying her cards on the table and saying, yeah, I want this fancy thing and I'm going to do everything in my power to get it. And if I don't get it, I'm going to throw a fit. I'm not saying that's what she did. But even if that's what she did, to me, that's less bad than being bored into it.
No, I agree. It's a complete joke. And the funny thing is, it's like... sort of they get angry for being wealthy and being gentrified and having servants wipe their backsides. It's
no,
so
you don't
weird.
understand. I'm saying people like you who don't like Meghan for wanting that, but you don't mind the king for being born into it.
But because he's had no choice. She had a choice to go into it. He didn't.
He has a choice.
By birthright.
With one act, he could renounce the monarchy and turn your country into a republic, which he should. They have a choice.
No, that's something in Star Wars, David. You know that's not a real thing.
They have a choice to resign. They have a choice not to be a part of it. There is a choice.
But that's not going to end the monarchy. There's too many people who love the monarchy for it to ever end.
You don't think the royal family, if they worked even half-hard at this, could take down the monarchy of England?
No.
What do you think would happen if everyone in that family decided, we think this system is bullshit and we would like to replace it with something more equitable? You think the monarchy would still be there?
I think that's the story of King Ralph, isn't it? There was a film about that. King Ralph?
King Ralph? I don't even know what you're talking about.
There was a film called King Ralph with the guy who played in Roseanne, where the whole royal family died and it was an American who ended up being the King of England. Great film. Very topical. But I think the idea of monarchy is so ingrained in British people that it would always end up somehow coming back.
It's so ingrained that you think someone born into it has a right to it, but somebody who wants it, like Meghan Markle, is off. That's how ingrained it is, and that's how messed up it is.
That's how messed up it is. It's a lineage. It's like Christianity.
And you think other countries that are absolute monarchies, like Saudi Arabia, you think that's all fine?
No, they're horrific.
I'm just saying it's the same process. It just happens to be an absolute monarchy rather than a constitutional monarchy, but it's the same logic. Like that logic applied to the extreme presents a monarchy like that. I'm saying the logic is flawed, and you're saying Meghan Markle's a bad person for wanting it.
I just think Meghan Markle has gone about it the wrong way.
And being born into it is the right way?
Well, I think she's gone into an existing club and has tried to change the club rules.
Yeah.
But then, so who's right and who's wrong? Is it a club for having existing rules, open and transparent and saying, this is our club, this is our rules? Or is it her for coming in and thinking, well, it's 2020, and I'm woke and I'm this and I'm that, and I'm going to change it up because I don't like the way it is?
Easy answer.
If you don't like it,
easy answer to that question. It's the club's fault. It's just like those clubs that wouldn't let in minorities and then people sued and then they have to let them in, or covenants and deeds of houses that are racist saying you can't sell this house. There's so many clubs and so many covenants and so many traditions that are messed up, and it's very easy to say they're wrong. I'm on her side. To me, she's no different than like a Kardashian or someone who just wants to be famous and successful for no good reason. In America, they get patted on the back. I don't know if that's good or bad, but everyone has the opportunity to be that. In the UK, if you try to enter the royal family and you don't fit the mold, everyone hates you and says you just want it for the power and the success. But if you're born into it, you deserve it. That's bullshit, and you know it. You just like it because you're British, you know? When you apply it to a different country, you'll probably agree with me that it's messed up. But because you're British, you think it's fine. And that's fine, but you at least need to be honest about that.
You lost me at constitutional.
I'm just saying, you thinking this system is all right, it's a messed up system. Just be honest with yourself. Say, there's many things in my life that I like that are messed up, but you got to be honest with yourself.
Okay, so for example, do I think that the system is messed up? I think there are many messed up things about the system, but there is an element of me of being British and being proud of being British and having the monarchy no matter how messed up it is. I prefer having, as bad as a king and queen is, than having like your elected officials who are no better.
That same logic can be applied to people in the southern United States who fly the Confederate flag. I'm just proud of something. I'm just proud of something, and it's my heritage, and I know it's messed up. I'm not saying that slavery and the Civil War and the Confederacy is better or worse than, slavery was something that was imported from England. It was a British concept.
I know, we created it. We loved it. We marketed it, and we sent it out. We were like Apple. We did really well.
You got rid of it first, which is, I guess, better than the southern United States. You didn't need a civil war to stop doing it, which I got to give you a little credit there. Having said that, that logic of it's my history, it's my heritage, I know there's not great parts to it, but I'm proud of it, can be used to justify any crappy history. How about you say I'm proud of it, but it needs to end?
I'm proud of it, but I don't think it needs to end. It may be able to be modified and brought up to date.
But isn't that what Meghan Markle was trying to do?
No, because she went about it the wrong way.
What's the wrong way?
I think she went about it the wrong way. So this is my genuine opinion about this. She married him. It was great. Everybody loved them. They were the Fab Four. They were like the new Beatles. Kate and William, Meghan and Harry. Oh my God, they were amazing together. But the way the hierarchy is that obviously he is the spare and then obviously William's the heir. Now, I believe that the brothers just fell out as friends and brothers would do. You've fallen out with your brothers. I've fallen out with my friends. But it's so magnified because of, if this had happened even 20 years ago, without the intrusive publicity that we get from the internet now, I don't think it would have been a big story. I don't think we would have known as much. I think we would have just said, now, 20 years ago, there would have been a problem that she was black, and I disagree with that, 100%. I don't think genuinely that the issue is that she's black or mixed race. I don't think
But all those people that would have had a problem with it 20 years ago are still around now. They are that family. Having said that, you haven't even come an inch close to answering my question, how did she go about it the wrong way?
I think she went in, which was good. And I think, for example, there are traditions which have got, for example, curtsying to the Queen, right? Now, you may agree with it or disagree with it. You may think it's completely beneath you to curtsy to the Queen. You may think it's not, it's something that's just, a silly tradition. She knew full well that when she meets the Queen, even that her own children and grandchildren address her as the Queen. It's just a tradition. Whether you like it or not, it's just the way it is. For her to come in and plead ignorance about saying, oh, I didn't know you had to do that, that's ridiculous. That's just stupidity. And that caused, if it was an issue, then that caused a rift, then that's fine. I don't know. We don't know.
Look, the fact that I said, give me your best point, how she did it the wrong way, and all you could say was she didn't curtsy properly, I don't even need to argue with you. Even if it is a valid point, it's such a weak point. You're honestly bolstering my argument.
Okay, she stole the Queen's dogs and then stabbed it. Right? I didn't want to bring it up, David. Right? But you pushed me.
The corgis. Think of the corgis!
Meghan Markle stole a corgi, stabbed it to death. Right? And then sold it to slave traders. Did you really need me to go there, David?
I did. Tony, thank you.
David, always a pleasure. Never a chore.
Have you ever thought to yourself, hey, I could do a podcast? Well, my friend and comedian Annick Adelle thought that to herself, so she reached out to the only person she could think of, me, to do a show. But guess what? Like most podcasts, this project is turning to be incredibly difficult. So we're going to get the conversation a little more deep, a little more meta, and we'll discuss with a comedian how difficult podcasting really is. We are here with comedian, friend, to do something a little meta. We're going to talk about how difficult podcasting is with comedian Annick Adelle. Not only are we going to talk about how difficult it is, I am currently going through a difficulty, which is filling out this show. And so you're helping me do that. But also I like you. Also I like talking to you. Annick, what a great pleasure it is to have you.
Sir, thank you for having me. I'm so happy.
So you hear your friends do a podcast. You hear Uncle Millie do a podcast about football. You hear Aunt Grenadine do a podcast about gardening. And it seems kind of easy when you hear it, doesn't it?
It does. And the jingles and the teasers, and it's all so polished. And there's answers and questions, and it's good ideas. And you're like, wow, they must be pro. And they're not.
No, they're not. And you as a comedian, you think, I want to broaden my horizons. I want to do a podcast. And who do you think to do it with? First of all, whatever you thought, it was a bad idea. But who did you think when you decided to start your own podcast, which has not launched? I don't even think it has a name yet. Who did you think to do it with?
Well, see, that's the problem. I didn't think. I did not think. I just went for it. I was like, this person is amazing. I think we have good chemistry. I think we can talk about things endlessly and meaningfully. And you know who it is? It's you, David.
It's a shock to us all. And we have met to tape probably 8 times now, I would say.
Yes. Well, 2 in person.
2 in person.
And the rest over Zoom.
The rest over Zoom. And what do we have to show for those 8 times? Like if you had to show somebody something right now, what would it be?
Oh my God, don't ask me that. That's very sad, because I think we barely put together a trailer of like 1 minute, and we even got a little bit of feedback on it, and everybody says it's terrible. So I think we have nothing to show for it. But
all right.
I feel like we had fun. Your cat certainly had fun. She ate all the gum that we were not supposed to eat on the podcast. So
Annick, you know my cat is a man. It's a male, okay?
Okay, well, I didn't use any pronouns.
You said he!
Oh.
It's okay.
Well, then that's right. It's a he, isn't it?
I mean, I just call it a cat. It's a cat.
It's a cat.
I think if you chop off their balls or I don't know, what do they do? Tie the tubes? I don't even know what spading an animal is. I think if you do that much, they're about the same, Not important. Podcasting. It's harder than it looks. Now that you've done it a little bit, you have a very high bar for what you want. So you have this image of what you want, and then you sit down to do it, and you realize I don't have a lot of experience, like anyone does with anything. I'm not singling you out here. And you realize the gap between what you want to do and what you've done is vast. And that's where the hard work is.
I'll tell you what. I thought when we first recorded and we sat in your kitchen, I thought our talk was amazing.
Okay.
because it was just like any other talk we have, just this time we recorded it. And I thought it was fun. Our voices were amazing. And then we met for another recording, and that felt like, I don't know, schlepping stones, And I was like, why is this so difficult? And I think it was difficult because this time around we were like, all right, let's hit this note, let's hit this topic. We also have to think about this. And all of a sudden we were in our head, and now it becomes this, more business, more mainstream, more commercialized, polished version of, instead of just a talk, now it's like, okay, we got to talk about this. So all this, that's kind of like the comedian going on stage and being like, okay, today I'm going to do this joke, don't forget this punchline. Ooh, I want to try this tag. And all of a sudden you're in your head, you're not in the moment, and then all the magic goes out the window.
But you didn't want to release that first recording. You said it was too long. You said it needed editing. You were like so unhappy with. You're not being honest with yourself. If we went to release that first recording today, I don't think you would be happy with it because we meandered. We talked for an hour, which is fine by me. I'm happy to release garbage like that. But you wanted something punchy. You wanted something sharp. So The energy of the first time, coupled with the attempt of doing something sharp and not having the energy, it's like you want the best of both. So
always, who doesn't? And that's the thing. That's, I think, what gets me into trouble in comedy and in podcasting. When we did the trailer just now, as you know, we recorded like 5 versions of this. We were semi-happy with 2, and even on those 2, we couldn't settle on 1, but we mixed from 2 into 1 to get a trailer, and was still not happy with it. I mean, I am not. And I think the problem is, in podcasting, as probably as well as in life, when do you accept something as okay result and release it, because you're never going to hit that perfect world that you want to hit?
When do you accept something as an okay result and release it? If it's at work, when do you accept it as an okay result and submit it? If you're a student, when do you accept it as an okay result and submit the paper? As a parent, when do you accept what I've planned out for my child, what school we've picked? I think that's a really deep question. When do you accept something as an acceptable result and say, I'm done with it, it's submitted, I've dotted the I's and crossed my T's, I've done my best, or I've done my okayest? Is there a difference between doing your best and doing your most okay or your most acceptable?
I think it all boils down to your gut feeling. Like when I were doing the talk with you the first time, and I thought, my gut feeling was like, this is amazing, we should take it. The only problem I had was, it's so long, it's an hour, who's going to listen to that for an hour? So that was the only thing. And so, but my gut feeling is on, like, I'm still thinking it was a good one. And so then you get in your head and you're like, oh, it's so long, we should, trim it down, yeah? Then you have to like counterintuitive, maybe you have to be like, okay, you know what? It's only going to get worse. We're going to take the first taping and it's going to be an hour, whatever.
Maybe that's what we should do. But I think there's a deeper question here as an artist. Like, when you started doing stand-up, did you think you were okay?
No, I thought it was terrible.
But you quote unquote released it. You still went to open mics. You still did shows. You released your work into the world. You performed. What's the difference between that and this?
I think there's a big difference because you can't search it. You can't retrieve it. I went to an open mic. It's gone. It's right there in front of those 5 people or whoever, showed up. But podcasting, I mean, you can listen to it probably in 10 years if you wanted to. I think I can equate it better to having to release a bit of mine on Instagram or YouTube.
And are you very protective about that?
Oh, talk to my editor. He hates me because I'm always going, can you make this pause a little longer? And this doesn't, it doesn't, I'm never happy with it.
We're here with Annick Adelle answering the deep questions. When do you accept something as okay and release it? I think in podcasting, for me at least, the way I've attempted to get better, and while I'm still terrible, I'm maybe 2% better than I was 8 years ago. I think it's just recording it. If it's god awful, don't use it. Like if it's god awful and you're willing to put in the extra work, like I'll tape an interview once a month where I'm like, I can't use this,
Yeah.
I don't mean to throw publicists under the rug here, but when publicists reach out and they're like, my client wants to be on your show and talk about this, and really they just want to talk about themselves and like, I don't care about your brand of soap or your motivational speaking counseling company. Those ones usually suck, so I try not to take those. But generally I just release it, and I'm comforted by the fact that the next day I'm going to release something else.
Really? So it's a numbers game to you?
Well, yeah, but I'm trying to get good or experienced or trying to grow my craft of getting out a body of work every day. My ideal medium is something live, something daily. It's not that NPR thoughtful, Ira Glass voice. So that's me. That's what I'm trying to do. So the answer to my question for my medium, even though I release it every day, it's like, okay, don't not release it because it's bad. Release something better tomorrow.
So, but then we're not far apart, because if that's if that makes you feel okay with yourself, and from your gut feeling, you're like, I don't love it, but I also don't hate it, then that's exactly what we're both doing. I think the only difference is you get the good from, I'm going to do something better tomorrow, whereas I get the, yes, this is good, from actually trying to make it good.
And you're not a quote unquote podcaster. You're a comedian who's doing a podcast. So I get it. You want it to be perfect. I'm just not sure you get the skills to make it perfect unless you just keep on doing it and doing it and doing it. And I guess that's what we can keep doing. We can keep on rehearsing. We can keep on doing episode 1 5,000 times, and then in 2085, when we're in the old folks' home, I'll have the nurse push me over to your room, and we'll get the recorder going, and we'll release our first episode. It'll be great.
But answer this for me. Do you think there's a second chance to make a first impression?
No, but I think you can work really hard to change someone's mind about what their first impression is.
True. But wouldn't it be easier to make a really good first impression and then try to live up to that standard afterwards? Or is it easier to have a mediocre first impression and then try to convince, no, look, I'm getting better?
I don't know. Is life worth doing it really easy and having everyone like you, or doing it the hard way and convincing them to like you? That's the question, right? I think it's a combination of both. AnnickAdelle.com. That's ANNICKADELLE.com. Annick, thank you for filling the time. You're helping me achieve what you and I are unable to do.
Anytime. And, for deep, deep, deep thoughts, I'm always available.
Coming soon to theaters near you in 2085, David and Annick's podcast that doesn't even have a name yet.
From the senior home in California or Florida. Let's see.
Yeah, if we are successful, it'll be California. If not, it'll be rural Florida.
Nice. Thanks for having me.
Here's what's coming up. You may know that this show has an intern, and I know what you're thinking. There isn't even a competent host. Why should there be an intern? That is a great question, one we won't answer tonight. But the other day, our intern couldn't get all his work done. And while I'm completely empathetic about his excuse, his reason is just too good not to interview him about. Insects exploded all over his room, and he couldn't get his stuff done. So in a moment, we'll talk to Zach Zhang about an insect explosion. We are here with the most important member of our team, Zach Zhang, our intern.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here safe and sound, unaware to some of the other listeners. I have been dealing with some sort of an infestation in my room that has caused me great stress, but I'm now safe and sound because I've conquered the war.
First of all, do you know what a bug guy is? And it's okay if you don't. I didn't know what that was until I moved to New York.
Assuming it doesn't just mean a guy who's into bugs, what does a bug guy mean?
So every big building, a building that's big enough to have like a superintendent will typically have on, it's not a full-time job, but they're kind of like on contract, or they come by once in a while to deal with the bugs, because the buildings here are old and the cockroach infestation in New York is like from the 1800s. I mean, they are entrenched in the cities. They are residents. They just don't pay rent. And so every building that's old has...
I bet you those cockroaches can speak. They just don't want to pay taxes.
Right? It's the cockroaches and the rats.
Like the amount of time they've been living with humans, they definitely know how to speak some languages for sure.
They do. So every building's got like some level of infestation. Even the ones that look new, renovated buildings, but the shell is like 100 years old. Mm-hmm. Whether it's got $10 billion condos or it's, single room housing, government housing, it's got cockroaches. They don't discriminate,
Do they come with their buddy, the New York mice or the New York rats?
So the rats kind of stay outside, actually.
Yeah.
They're hardy creatures.
You know what? That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Is it true that they bite concrete over there? Like they have developed bites that go through concrete?
I don't know that, but I know they ate through like the insulation wrapping the electrical wires of my friend's car. Like they got in under the hood and they basically like ate the car. Like they'll eat anything.
Nah, New York City is the home of mutant rats,
right?
And if not now, definitely soon.
Like I think my cat, if it was out in the country and it encountered a field rat, like a gleeful field rat who didn't have a life of problems, my cat could take that rat. But a New York City rat, dude, I think they carry shanks. Like they have one eye, they have peg legs.
Yeah, they're experienced fighters. They're from like the goons, They're from the slums.
So I think one New York City rat could take my cat for sure. He acts like he's tough, but he ain't tough.
How big are New York City rats on average? Not to get off topic.
5,000 to 6,000 pounds, 10 feet wide. I don't know. They're huge.
Oh my goodness.
They're huge.
They're like Godzilla.
I don't know. They're big. They're the biggest rats I've ever seen. That's for sure. We're getting way off topic here.
They're still pests, but a different type of pest.
So a bug guy is a guy who comes to the building and just kind of deals with this low-level bug infestation that every single building has, whether it's roaches. Actually, usually it's just roaches, but that's what a bug guy is. You have been dealing with a bug infestation in your bedroom, dude. I feel terrible for you. What has happened?
This is what I suspect happened. So in our little shoe hall area from when we enter our house, there's a little mesh window that we always keep open just to air out because that's where the recycling bin is. And there's actually a hole there. So I suspect that flies have been coming in through that hole, and when we've been leaving the other door towards the inside of the house, separating the shoe hall from the actual house, a fly just buzzed in. And because the basement is also where we store most of the raw meats and the other cooking ingredients, it probably found its way there. And I do live in the spare room in the basement, which happens to have a window that that shows directly outside. So I guess they all just huddled up where I am living in, and it doesn't help that my room is pretty warm.
Oh my goodness! So
they just huddled up in this corner of the window here that I usually never check because I don't bother with it. And they've just been living under the curtains, I feel. Wow. I've seen them just crawl out, and I got so paranoid. I just couldn't stop looking at it without an electric swatter in my hand.
Now, despite the high salary we give you, you do live with your parents. What are they saying you're doing? And are they helping you? Or they feel bad for you? Do they think just, man up and deal with it? What's going on?
Oh, they definitely help just by driving me to get the raid.
Raid. We are looking for a raid sponsorship on this show, so hopefully this will.
Perfect. This might be the segment right here. But yeah, we got that can of raid. I went up to my room and I just spritzed it. They recommended like a good 12 seconds to clear the entire room, but I honestly spent the entire 12 seconds just focusing on that window.
And then you had to spend a night or two out of the room just to let the toxin settle?
So it's all started like 2 days ago from now, where I just noticed a fly, and I noticed another one, and that very day I killed about 7 flies that all came from the window, and that was when I was like, that's an alarming amount of flies.
That is.
So I tried to do something about it. I tried to swat them all, because based on what I read online, if they're swattable, then likely there's not many, but they just kept appearing. So I'm like, okay, there's definitely many more than I expected. So we went to Walmart. I'm looking for the flying insect killer or the mosquito and flies killer, and I grabbed that. The entire next day, I literally spritzed that room like 5 times throughout the day, and I left it 2 hours closed in between. So I would have woken up at like 8 a.m., spritzed it, 10 a.m., and then 12 p.m. spritzed it, 3 p.m. spritzed it, and I went for that the entire day that day. And then overnight, I just let it gas up in there, I guess. The morning comes, and I'm still paranoid as heck. So I go back in there one more time, and I spritz it up one more time, and then we're here. And if I do look at the window right now, I do see just one dead fly on the corner of the window. So I know that it's working. I think my plan is tonight I'm gonna spritz it one more time, and then tomorrow I'm gonna start vacuuming and sweeping it up.
Have you considered getting a spider and then a bird and then a cat and then a dog and then a goat and then a cow and then maybe, an old lady who'll swallow the fly and maybe she'll die? Did they teach you that song, or am I like so old I'm showing my age here?
You might be showing your age here.
You don't know the old lady who swallowed the fly and then she swallows the spider?
I don't know the old lady that swallowed the fly. Would you like to delight me in that so I know what to do next time?
It's just a song about an old lady. She swallows a fly, and then she's like, well, no, I got a fly in me. So then she swallows a spider, but then she's like, I got a spider. So she swallows a bird to get the spider, cat to get the bird, a dog to get the cat, a goat to get the the dog, a cow to get the goat, and then at the end, it's like, I know an old lady who swallowed a fly. Perhaps she'll die. That's it.
I see. You know what? Maybe I should use that technique next, because I'm quite a glutton, so it might work out for me. But yeah, that's how I handled it. I'm hoping that is the end of it, but based on what I've read online, I might expect more at the end of August or next year, so I'm just keeping an eye out.
Yeah, and keep on top of it now. You got the poisson.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You got the poisson. That's French for poison. I'm a well-versed French speaker. La poisson. And
La poisson.
So next time you see one or two, it's time to, re-up on that poison.
Oh, yeah, it's time. Got to catch it early before it gets worse.
In July of 2008, I had a spider sack unleash in my apartment. And I was an arachnophobe. I got over it. That's a story for another day, how I got over it. Exposure therapy, not important. Inadvertent exposure therapy. I had a huge spider on me, and it just didn't. I lived to see the day, and now I'm not scared of spiders. But the worst thing that could happen, a huge dock spider was on me, and I just killed it with my hand instinctively. And that day I was like, wow.
You're the man.
It just died, and it's small, and it crunched in my hand, and what am I so scared of? Regardless, I'm peak scared of spiders. A little sack hatches in my apartment, and there's maybe 200 little spiderlings all on my ceiling like little dots.
No, that's scary.
Yeah. I work myself up into a tizzy. I'm on a stool, just killing them because they're not scary to me at this point, but I'm worried they're all going to grow. So I kill them. I think I get all of them, but I'm so worked up, and I got an exam the next day. And I go sleep at my ex-wife's house, her parents' house, with her, because I could not be in that house. And I just don't go to the exam. And I tell the teacher what happened, and she's like, you can't miss an exam for that. Like, you're in trouble, mister. And I'm like, what about a note from my psychiatrist? And she says, okay, I guess so. So I got a note from my psychiatrist, and then I brought it to the teacher. She let me retake the exam in the office with her. And the next year, every assignment that came out, she treated me like I was this sensitive snowflake. She's like, are you sure you can get it done on time? Are you sure you're okay? She was just so nice to me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, dude. And she's like, are you having an anxiety attack today? If you are, you can take an extra day. She was so nice after that. That's my bug story. So there you go.
I can imagine how stressful that is, because just seeing them in my room has led me to sleep. We're very lucky to have a random bed in the living room for purposes I will not explain, because it actually has to deal with something medical related. But I've just been sleeping there for like the past 3 days. I cannot get myself to sleep in my room again. I don't even feel comfortable working in here yet, but I'm doing my best.
Are you scared of flies?
I'm not scared of flies. I'm just scared of creepy crawlies. I don't like the fact of creepy crawlies and tiny little things that I can't really see nearby me. And I don't like the fact that they're just hidden somewhere within my room. And it's funny, I don't actually have that problem with spiders, because I actually like the fact that they kill some of the pests that come in. It's just very unfortunate that I have not seen any spider in my room in the past week. I had a little friend in the red,
Well, you got to get a pet spider.
I got to get a pet spider, I had one in the corner of my room. I named him Jerry, but I wonder where he's been.
Where's Jerry? Where's Jerry when you need him? That guy never shows up when you need him.
Exactly, man. When I had a whole bunch of food for him, he just decides to up and leave.
Well, I'm glad the bugs apparently are gone. Zach, thanks for talking to me about this.
Oh, for sure, man. It's great to talk about this with someone who's also had a experience with insects, I guess. Especially with a similar anxiety attack, I suppose.
Zach Zhang, he's our intern, and thanks for doing this again. That is our show. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you, and I will see you here on Tuesday. And by here, I mean wherever you're listening to this. And by see you, I mean you'll listen to this. Or you won't. I can't tell you what to do. As always, I'm not your mother.